Welcome to today's episode of World Class Scholars, where we explore leadership styles in Africa. I'm your host, engaging in a rich discussion with Prof. Kwesi Yankah about the Verandah boy phenomenon. Prof. Yankah, could you start by explaining what you mean by a Verandah boy leader? Thank you for having me. A Verandah boy refers to leaders who rise on charm and charisma rather than competence. They're often self-made but lack the systems-focused approach necessary for sustainable development. Interesting. How does this leadership style impact organizations or governmental bodies in the long term? In the short term, charisma can motivate and rally people. However, without systems and strategic planning, these organizations often face issues like poor succession planning, fear or flattery cultures, and lack of clear documented processes. This can leave them vulnerable to collapse once that leader exits. It seems like the presence of a strong, charismatic leader can mask deeper systemic challenges. How can organizations identify if they're being led by a Verandah boy? Exactly. There are several signs such as centralized decision-making, absence of standard operating procedures, and a culture that doesn't encourage feedback or innovation. Observing these can caution members that more of a structured, process-oriented approach might be lacking. What actionable steps can organizations take to shift from this charismatic style to a more sustainable, institution-building approach? Investing in systems, documenting processes, ensuring robust succession plans, and fostering a culture of accountability are crucial steps. An institution-building scorecard can help track these areas. Starting with small adjustments like formalizing one process per quarter can create momentum for broader change. Prof. Yankah, you've also written about how this concept ties into broader debates about governance in Africa. Can you elaborate on this? Certainly, the Verandah boy metaphor reflects the challenges in African politics, where leadership often prioritizes image over substance. To move forward, we need a meritocratic system that values competence and ethical governance over mere populism. That's a profound insight. For our listeners wanting to explore this further, where can they start implementing changes? Begin by assessing your organization's current practices. Identify areas where decision-making feels concentrated and involve your team in discussions to democratize processes. Over time, you want to see a balance of charismatic leadership and sound institutional practices. Thank you, Prof. Yankah, for a thought-provoking discussion. As we conclude, what would you like our listeners to reflect on regarding their personal or organizational leadership? I'd encourage listeners to ask themselves if their organizations depend too heavily on personalities. Start building systems that can survive and thrive beyond individual strengths. That's excellent advice. Tune in next week as we discuss fake degrees, real damage, and how ethical integrity can reshape African education. Until then, keep questioning and building robust structures around you. All right, so picking up right from where we left off, let's explore more about the tangible differences we observe between charismatic leadership and the builder or system-centric leadership. Can you give us an example or perhaps a case study that really epitomizes this contrast? Absolutely. A classic example could be the post-independence African states. Many of these countries were initially led by charismatic figures who, despite their initial popularity, struggled to build resilient institutions. Take Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah, for instance. His charisma was unquestionable, yet the systems around him were not institutionalized effectively, leading to vulnerabilities exploited later. That's an interesting point. So when you talk about the vulnerabilities, are you suggesting that these structures, or rather the lack thereof, were what destabilized governance post-charisma era? Precisely. Without solid frameworks, such governance structures kind of stand on shaky ground. When the charismatic leader exits, often abruptly, their policies and projects can crumble or be easily overturned, largely due to a lack of procedural institutionalism that should have been entrenched. Right, transitioning leadership seem to be a common sticky point. But where do we see successful shifts away from charisma-driven models toward more system-based approaches? Look at Botswana. It's often highlighted as a beacon of good governance in Africa because its leadership has consistently emphasized institutional growth beyond individual charisma. Successive leaders have strengthened the structures that uphold the rule of law, economic management, and transparency. Botswana's an admirable example. The consistent growth there suggests that when embedded, these systems reinforce themselves over time. Are there specific strategies that leaders can employ to transition from reliance on personal charisma to institutional robustness? Realistically, it involves cultivating a culture of accountability and encouraging delegation rather than centralization. Leaders should progressively involve others in decision-making processes, thereby distributing power and responsibility, which strengthens institutions. Delegation, as simple as it sounds, can be quite transformative, I believe. It sounds like a virtuous cycle. Indeed, and this pivot requires leaders to have humility and foresight, not traits always associated with charismatic personalities driven by firm egos. So humility necessarily becomes a critical asset of the builder leader. I see that resonating with another aspect you touched on, ethics in governance. How does this align with our broader themes of competent and ethical administration? That's an excellent correlation. Ethical governance goes hand in hand with institutional competence. When systems are ethically aligned, they operate with less bias or undue influence, focusing more on meritocratic processes. Yes, and this ethical alignment, I suppose, creates trust in public systems, encouraging civic engagement. But how do we instill and nurture these values from the roots, especially in places still transitioning? Education is key here. Building ethical frameworks in education, promoting civic responsibility and governance literacy from a young age is foundational. It raises individuals who value fairness, accountability, and transparency. Education really sounds like a long-term investment. Instilling these values gradually seems to prepare future leaders. Absolutely, it's not instant, but the returns are lasting and transformative when societal values are ingrained in competent and ethical stewardship. This ideally translates into leadership that prioritizes sustainability over short-lived grandeur. As we grow closer to wrapping up, I'm thinking of consolidation. Whether institutional consolidation translates to stability in varied socio-political contexts across the continent. Indeed, institutional consolidation does lead to stability, at least in contexts where it's allowed to flourish without interference. However, regional dynamics, historical contexts, and external pressures can impact these systems. Navigating these external pressures while maintaining consistency must be challenging. Certainly, but a focus on multifaceted growth and resilience building offers a counterbalance. Integrating local contexts into system building is essential too. Ultimately, it seems like it's about balance between charisma and the systems that outlast any individual leader. Exactly. It's possible to celebrate a leader's charisma while ensuring that the institutions they're part of are robust enough to carry on without them. After all, it's about leadership evolving into legacy through sustainable systems.